So Proposition 3 is a constitutional amendment. If it passes, it would repeal Proposition 8, which passed in 2008, and in doing so would declare that the right to marry is a fundamental right in California. This would update the state constitution to reflect federal court rulings, but it wouldn't change anything since all laws prohibiting same-sex marriage have already been declared unconstitutional by the federal courts. So, how did Proposition 3 get on the ballot? Because it's a constitutional amendment, it requires a 2/3 majority in both the state assembly and the state senate. By the way, while I praised Ballotpedia in my introduction, if you notice on the left-hand side of this table, it says vote in the California House of Representatives. That should say the California State Assembly. And so I'm going to go ahead and email the editor of the Ballotpedia and explain to them that on some of them they got it correct, on some of them they got it wrong. And so it should be the California State Assembly. So Proposition 3, as you can see, was voted overwhelmingly in both the California State Assembly and in the California State Senate. The vote was in the Assembly, it was 67 in favor, 0 against, with 13 not voting. In the California State Senate, it was 30 in favor, no one voted against it, with 9 not voting. And however you want to interpret this, there were more Republicans who didn't vote than Democrats, but there's no explanation for why that is the case. What are the policy changes if Proposition 3 passes? Well, realistically speaking, there wouldn't be any policy changes, because what it would do is it would remove the outdate. There wouldn't be a policy change since federal courts have already said that laws prohibiting same-sex marriage are unconstitutional, right? And so the primary change would just be the removal of this outdated language in the California Constitution. However, if there were a shift in federal law or rulings regarding same-sex marriage, what it would do was it would go ahead and explicitly guarantee that in the state of California, the right of same-sex couples to get married would be protected. So imagine there was a federal court decision that reversed the decision that said that laws against same-sex marriage weren't prohibited any longer, right? Even if other states changed their laws, California would still protect the right to get married. What would the fiscal impact be? Well, there really wouldn't be any fiscal impact at all, since already same-sex couples can get married in California, so it wouldn't change anything as to who can get married and who can't get married. What are the arguments in favor of Proposition 3? First, the argument is that removing the outdated language banning same-sex marriage from the California proposition is a matter of justice and equality. Proposition 3 ensures that all couples, regardless of gender, can get married and have a constitutional right, aligning the state's constitution with the federal law. Although Proposition 8 is unenforceable, the law that recognized marriage between a man and a woman, which has been declared unconstitutional. Although Proposition 8 is unenforceable due to federal rulings, the discriminatory language remains in California's Constitution. Proposition 3 would remove that language, ensuring that California's laws reflect the state's values of inclusivity and equality. Also, in the event of that federal protections for marriage equality were to change, either through legislation, federal legislation, or court rulings at the federal level, Proposition 3 ensures that California would continue to protect same-sex marriage under state law, providing legal certainty for future generations. And then finally, the argument is in favor that public opinion on same-sex marriage has shifted dramatically from 2008 to now, and as such, there is a greater support for same-sex marriage now. Something like 70% of people in California support same-sex marriage. As such, this amendment reflects the will of the majority of Californians who now support equal marriage rights for all. The argument against Proposition 3 is essentially this is an unnecessary change. The measure is unnecessary since federal courts have already invalidated Proposition 8, and same-sex couples and same-sex marriage is protected by federal law. In terms of the organizations that talk about Proposition 13 and give recommendations, the California Republican Party was neutral on it. But the California Democratic Party, the Chamber of Commerce, the Labor Federation, the Los Angeles Times, and the Daily News all recommended a yes vote. So what's the meaning of a vote for Proposition 3? A yes vote supports a constitutional amendment to repeal Proposition 8, which defined marriage as a union between a man and a woman. A no vote opposes the constitutional amendment, thus essentially keeping Proposition 8, which defined marriage as a union between a man and a woman, in the California Constitution. I hope that was helpful.